Hello everyone, my name is Greg McLean, I'm the director here at the Winthrop Public Library. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Please help yourself to some water and some snacks throughout the evening. I know it can get a little warm in here sometimes. Welcome Andrew Biggio. Let you take it from here.
Sure. Yeah, my book's been out since June 1st, and it's been like the dream. I just had a book signing at the Normandy Victory Museum in France with about 4 World War II veterans. I was at the Bastogne War Museum in Belgium with 4 World War II veterans. I was in Italy at the Gothic Line Museum with 2 World War II veterans. I was the guest speaker at the Marine Corps Ball up at Foxwoods last month. I've had numerous book signings and talks, but the point I'm getting at, it's nice to be home in Winthrop at the local Winthrop Public Library. To be invited, of course. I'm very, very proud of the Winthrop roots I have. I'm very proud of Winthrop's sacrifice in World War II. Almost 30 kids from Winthrop were killed in action from this town. And their names are on all the street corners you see, including my great uncle, who was a significant inspiration to write this book and what happened to him at age 19, leaving Herman Street in Winthrop and not coming back from the Second World War. So, you know, I was a mediocre student at best growing up. I'm not an English major. I'm not a straight A student. I hated homework and things like that. But once you find a passion about something, I mean, you can really do anything. And my passion was always veterans. Since I was a young kid, I loved veterans. I don't know why. I don't know why I was so drawn to these men. And it was just an amazing thing. When I was a young kid, I remember when we had an abundant amount of World War II veterans in the 90s and the 80s. And some of you people here grew up with them as your parents probably. And I always found them very fascinating that such men would sacrifice life and limb for this country. And I remember, you know, in the parades, I liked watching the veterans and wearing their fancy American Legion caps or their VFW caps. I remember them, you know, selling poppies in front of the storefronts. We don't see this stuff anymore because the amount of veterans that have passed away from that World War II generation has dwindled so significantly that in 5 years, I mean, it'll be almost impossible to find a World War II veteran. Will they still be there? Yeah, there'll be about 100 and 101. But the government says that there was 16 million World War II veterans. 16 million. So that covers everyone from 1941 to about 1946, 47, because they count occupation troops as World War II veterans alone. So you have to marginalize very small of that window of men and women who actually saw combat, right? So it's even smaller, 1941 to 1945 during the actual wartime. And then, so that number, those guys are just very hard to find. They say right now there's about 300,000 of that 116 million veterans still alive, so 300,000. I think, from as far as I know, we only have 1 D-Day veteran left in town here in Winthrop. And that's Bobby Oliver. If you guys don't know who he is, he lives on Walden Street. He's about 90s. He's a retired Winthrop police officer. He's 96. He served on LST 309. In Sicily, in Salerno, and in Normandy. So for those who aren't familiar with an LST it's a ship that brings troops and supplies to the beaches during, you know, X, Y, and Z invasions. But he is all I know as far as a June 6th D-Day veteran still alive in this town. We have other World War II veterans in town, but as far as I know who participated in Operation Overlord, that would have been Bobby Oliver. So, why did I start writing about World War II even though I'm not a writer? I served in Iraq and Afghanistan as a U.S. Marine in 2007, in 2011, in 2008 as well, Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I came home, I kind of I jumped right back into things. I had a strong family support system. Some veterans don't have that, and they come home and they fall through the cracks, but I had a great family support system. I was right back into college. I was right back taking a police exam, and I know what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a Marine, I wanted to be a cop. But after a while, I started asking myself about the price of war, about why I came home in one piece, and a lot of Marines and soldiers did not. And then in particular, what would hit me is that, you know, this screen's kind of fuzzy, but if you know, this is Main and Herman Street. And at Main and Herman Street is a square of a gentleman I mentioned earlier, or a kid, a 19-year-old kid, named Andrew Biggio. Andrew was from Herman Street, graduated Boston Latin School, and joined the U.S. Army. He was sent to Italy. He saw some very hellish fighting up the east coast of Italy until they got to what was called Hitler's Gothic Line. It was a series of defense lines up in the mountains, the North Apennines, Florence area, Barberino, Bologna, all the way across. And Hitler's troops had been there since the late 30s. So they had plenty of time to entrench themselves in there with intricate defense systems, U-shaped trenches, barbed wire, pillboxes, bunkers, and these young American kids are sent up the hills to try to, you know, root out these Germans. Andy ultimately gets killed in action at age 19 on September 17th, 1944. So I come home, I survive, I live through my military experience, but every day I have to pass that sign, Andrew Biggio, my own name up there. So it was a little bit haunting. It's like, what happened to him that didn't happen to me? And so even though I wasn't having survivor's guilt for my own conflicts, which of course I do, it's natural, but I've done a lot to give back to wounded veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, but seeing this young kid's name up there just was something that bothered me. And I remember my grandmother telling me she had saved all of his letters he wrote home before he was killed. So one day I had just had enough, and I went right to my grandmother's house. I pulled the shoebox from underneath the bed, and I started reading his letters. And they were all mixed up. They weren't in chronological order. And the first letter I pulled out, and it's so funny, you know, we talk about kids being mama's boys, and you know, we want macho men, but I was reading this young kid's letter from World War II, in the infantry. Every letter was addressed to his mother. His mother was his best friend in every letter. And I guess it's something, it's hard for a lot of guys who want to be macho men to admit, but this kid was writing to his mom way more than his dad, way more than his brothers. Every letter was addressed to his mother. And the first letter I pulled out of there was, "Dear Mom, today I fired," it was from basic training, "I fired the M1 Grand rifle. This is an amazing rifle. It's more superior than the Germans and the Japanese." And it was the first time the United States had created a semi-automatic rifle where you could just put 8 rounds in it and fire away, while the Japanese and the Germans still have a bolt-action kind of weapons. And right then and there, I put the letter down. He's talking about this rifle right here, and I had to go out and buy one. I wanted to feel what he felt, I wanted to hold what he held, and I wanted to connect with this long-lost relative. So I go out and I buy a M1 Grand rifle, World War II rifle, and I'm holding it in my house, and I'm saying, wow, you know, I can't believe this kid gave his life holding this instrument, this tool of warfare. And then I started, you know, reading more lessons. But then after, the rifle only brought so much satisfaction for a short period of time, because then I was like, well, now what? I'm showing my family this, I'm showing my friends this, and then I go, oh, cool, it's a gun, you know. I'm like, no, it's not a gun. This is what they were carrying when they had the battle up in Italy in the mountains. And no, you don't understand. He died with something like this. And this one's from World War II. And it just wasn't enough. So, something else I had to do, and I had remembered there was an old guy who used to attend my Marine Corps functions. His name was Joe Drago, and I know he fought in the Battle of Okinawa. He's a World War II veteran. He'll know what I'm talking about. I'm going to bring this rifle to him and see what he says. So I got this rifle, which I probably should have brought here tonight. And I ring Joe's doorbell. and I said, hey Joe, do you remember this? And I take the rifle and I place it right into his hands. And at this age, Joe at the time was 91. He had gotten very weak. His legs had atrophied into very little skinny things because he wasn't getting up, getting around anymore. He was sitting in a recliner. This happens to all elderly, people that are in decline. And he went from being a weak old man, when I put that rifle into his hands, he shoulders it. He puts it in his shoulder, he aims in, he's waving it around, he's smiling from ear to ear. I have to look out of the way. I mean, the barrel swings right by my face, and he's behaving in a fashion I had never seen before after I put this rifle into his hands. And I sat down, and we talked about the Battle of Okinawa for about 4 hours. And I hit record on my phone, and I left it there. And when we were done talking, he could barely lift his head. I mean, he was exhausted from talking about 4 hours. I mean, I stayed with him. And I asked him, and I said, Joe, I always want to remember this day. Can you sign your name on this rifle? Can you add your name? And he didn't want to. He's like, no, it's such a beautiful weapon, and I want to mark it up. I said, Joe, please, I want to remember this. I knew I was in a race against time, putting this in his hands, and that I may never have this experience again. And he signed it. He signed Joe Drago, 22nd Marine Regiment, Okinawa. And I left his house. I looked down at that signature and I said, I need to get as many signatures as possible. I want to have this awesome thing signed by all these veterans. And it was therapeutic, right? So yeah, I wasn't sitting there finding out what happened to Andy on that hill in Italy yet, but I got a little bit of a taste of what it was like in World War II. I just listened to this guy, and the carnage on Okinawa, one of World War II's deadliest, biggest battles, the last battle, the last real big battle, the Battle of Okinawa, April Fool's Day, 1945. And I needed more. And I needed a guy that was in the Battle of the Bulge to sign my rifle. And I needed a guy who fought in the air war as a B-17 bomber. And then I wanted a guy in the Navy. And then I wanted a medic. And then I wanted a guy who stormed Omaha Beach. And it just became 215 names later on this rifle. 215 names. I was about 30 names in, maybe 20 names on the rifle in. And I was listening to a prisoner of war speak in Gardner, Massachusetts. I was in his living room. His name was Clarence Cormier, and he served with the 106th Infantry Division during the Battle of the Bulge. And unfortunately, they had one of the biggest surrenders since the American Civil War. 7,000 men surrendered. And because they were a brand new unit, they got put on in this area of the Ardennes Forest during the Battle of the Bulge, and our intelligence had no idea that there was 600,000 Germans coming from one of the last offensives. And they got overrun, and it was really bad, and he surrendered. 2 weeks in Europe, first day of combat, he's now a prisoner of war. And he spoke to me about how he was put on a death march, and I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of the Bataan Death March in the Philippines, but there were several kind of death marches also in Europe too that we don't know a lot about. And that was because the Germans were marching our prisoners all the way across Germany to certain camps, but those camps were being overrun by the Russians, so then they turned our prisoners around and marched them all the way back across Germany again. And I left his house, and I heard his daughter say, wow, I never heard Dad say that before. And I said to myself, wow, his own daughter has never heard this story. Imagine what the whole world doesn't know. If his own daughter doesn't know this story, what does the whole country not know? What does the whole world not know? And that's when I said I have to start writing about these men. Not just getting a signature on the rifle and having a cool relic in my man cave. I need to start writing and documenting this. If this guy's own daughter doesn't know this, and I'm not saying his daughter wasn't close to her father. The guys didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about the war. They didn't view themselves as special. Like I said, there was 16 million World War II veterans. Everybody came home. They got on with their lives. They got on with their careers. They had kids. They put the war behind them. They never repeated it, talked about it. If you talk to World War II veterans today, they can't even remember some of their buddies' names in their own squad because that's how blocked out they did it. And sometimes that's the right way to do it. It is. And so I put pen to paper, and I of those 215 World War II veterans, I picked about 19 of what I thought were the best and untold stories before. So, that, I get the book, I write the book, it becomes a bestseller, yeah. And then I'm like, next thing you know, of these hundreds of veterans I'm meeting, I'm finding out they never went back to places like France, Belgium, first world countries Italy, that we put on our bucket list to go to, Rome. No, never went back, no, don't care, I never went, it's like, what kind of hell went on in these places that we are dying to go to, that these guys refuse to go back to? And then the questions came, would you ever go back now? Well, I guess I would go back now. And I said, well, you know what? I'm gonna raise some money. And I raised $70,000. And I took over the last 3 or 4 years, I've taken World War II veterans back to Italy, Belgium, Normandy. I've sat in their foxholes with them. I walked their front lines with them. I've been to where they were wounded, where they were captured, where they lost friends. I've been bringing these men back to the places that I've written about with them. And it's been a remarkable experience. And I'm going to show you a clip of when I had the absolute honor to bring 2 World War II veterans back to Italy for the first time in 75 years. One who had lost his leg, had his leg blown off and had never returned.
So coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan was, it was great to be home and all, but what really helped me spark the rifle project was passing this sign every day. This is Andrew Biggio Square, and the first thing you'll think is, if people know me, they'll say, hey, that's your square, because my name is also Andrew Biggio. The problem is it's not my square. It was my grandfather's brother who was killed in action in World War II at the age of 19. And every day as a combat veteran myself, passing this sign, I decided to take it upon myself and find out what happened to the first Andrew Biggio on that hill in Italy. Andrew Biggio, the one we were just talking about who was killed in action, he was the last time he hugged his family, hugged his father right on this front porch right here. It's also the same porch that I left from as well. So it was kind of an uneasy feeling knowing that the last Andrew Biggio to go to war didn't come home. And luckily I was fortunate enough to be able to. When I was reading Andrew's letters that he wrote home before he was killed in Italy, I found one particular letter on how much he enjoyed this rifle, the M1 Garand. And for me, as an infantryman myself in the Marine Corps, it connected me right to this long-lost relative. I said, I want to go out and purchase an M1 Garand, have it in the family. This is the rifle that he carried when he died. And I went out and bought an M1 Garand. I came back to this house, I'm waving it around my room, I'm looking in the mirror with it, and then I said, okay, that's great, now what? I said to myself, well, who can I show this rifle to? And then I said, my neighbor. My neighbor, Joe Drago, was in the Battle of Okinawa. He was a Marine in the battle, one of the worst battles of World War II. So I went and knocked on his door, and at this time, age in his life, he was 92, and he was pretty much bound to his recliner. His legs had atrophied, he's weak and old, and as soon as I put this rifle in his hands, he had this burst of energy. He started waving the rifle around, smile from ear to ear, oh my God, I haven't held one of these in so long, and ha ha, and he's laughing, and I had to move out of the way because he's swinging this rifle around, and he started telling me all these stories about the Battle of Okinawa. And I said, wow, like I have something special here. And I said, I want to remember this forever. Sign your name on this rifle, Joe. And he refused to do it, and until I finally talked him into it, and he signed right there, Joe Drago, I Company, 3rd Battalion, 22nd Marines, Battle of Okinawa. I made it a mission, you call it therapy, call it research, call it what have you, of meeting these men that we've been reading about our whole lives, and these are the men why most of us had joined the military. World War II, jumping into Normandy, the Battle of the Bulge, the flag raising on Iwo Jima. Today's veterans literally live in the shadows of these men, and I took it upon myself to go see each one and interview them and learn how to live a successful life after combat. This rifle is signed by approximately 93 World War II veterans. About 30 of them on this have already passed away. This project was started in 2017, and it was my way of the youngest generation of veterans saying goodbye to the oldest generation of veterans, which is our World War II veterans. The VA says there's less than 300,000 World War II veterans still alive of the 16 million who served during World War II. If you look here on the inside of the upper receiver is a name of Albert Bucciarelli. Albert served with the 3rd Infantry Division during World War II. If you're familiar with the 3rd Infantry Division, they invaded Anzio, and they were also in the Battle of Monte Cassino, Italy, fighting some of Hitler's best German troops. Well, Albert, at age 19, was laying wire down, and an artillery shell landed in front of him, killed his sergeant, and blew off Albert's leg. Albert, he didn't want to go home from the war after that. He was laying there with one leg in Italy, and he told the nurses, told the doctors, I don't want to go home. He was very embarrassed, ashamed that he was going to be maimed for the rest of his life. And unfortunately, it wasn't his choice, but naturally the Army would eventually send him home. Today he's 94 years old. He's never been back to Italy, even with his family wanting to go on vacation in the 70s and 80s to Italy as a family vacation. He still refused to go. I believe they still went without him. He has avoided veterans organizations, groups, reunions his entire life until now. I spoke with his family, and I thought the best way to surprise him with a trip back to Italy would be at my annual event, the Boston's Wounded Vet Run.
He has no idea I located his squad leader's grave. He's never seen it. All he remembered his squad leader's first name is Ray. And so I didn't have much to work with, so I looked up every Ray that was buried in the Rome National Cemetery over in Italy. I think maybe there was about 14 Rays or Raymonds of the 8,000 names over there. And I broke it down to Albert's division. It was 3rd Infantry Division. I think that left me with about 4 or 5 Rays or Raymonds. Then I broke it down to the regiment, which brought me to 3 Rays and Raymonds, and then I was able to solve which Ray it was because the day he was killed was the same day Al lost his leg, you know, so. Here it is.
After leaving the information center on the cemetery, we put Al and Rocco in some golf carts and began to bring them to a specific plot.
Are you all good? Okay. All right, cool. See you in church.
Al only remembered his squad leader's name by his first name as Ray. As we approached this plot of graves, unbeknownst to Al, he was walking upon the gravesite of his squad leader. I wanted everyone to take a step back and give him some privacy because it was really just about to hit him. He had never seen a squad leader's grave before. He didn't know that I had located the squad leader's grave. All we had to go on was the first name of Ray. I researched every Ray that was buried in Rome National Cemetery, which was about, I believe, somewhere between 8 and 14 Raymonds or Rays. However, the dead giveaway was the day Ray was killed. It was the same day that Al lost his leg. And that Ray belonged to the same regiment, the same division, the same company, and it was Ray James from Kentucky.
It's something that hit me, and I don't know. I didn't know him that well, but I know him. And hey, he's gone. God bless him.
I'll never be able to tell you what Al was feeling at that moment. I wanted to give him his space. I told everyone that was on our trip to take a step back, and I could see Al talking to himself, like, as if, hey, sorry it's taken so long for me to come visit you, kind of deal. And as soon as Al began to lose his balance and get emotional, that's when I know I had to go over there and greet him. And the hug that Al gave me, I know he wasn't hugging me, he was hugging Ray.
He said, that barrage started, he says, let's hit the ground. He says, who knows where the shells are gonna land. And we were there, and about the 5th shell of that barrage is what got us. Never heard it coming until it was too late. And then bingo. It hit Ray directly. Ray had his feet on my shoulder. We were head to foot or whatever. And he got 100% of the shell got to him. I got the outskirts of it, which was bad enough. But hey, it happened. And when we got to the cemetery, Andy had found out where he was, who he was. All we had to go by was his first name. I didn't know his last name. I didn't know where he was from or anything. That morning, he had just come back from rest area. That was his last 4 hours on Earth. He took the blunt of a shell, which was a shell that dropped, they tell me, about a half a mile short of his target. So that was the end of it. I was fortunate. There was 3 guys pulling a guard duty out there. They came down after the barrage was over, and we were in a riverbed that was dry with 4 German trucks out there all burned up. They scared me more when they came down around those trucks than getting hit. They saw what had happened. They loaded me on a Jeep and hooked me off to the hospital. It was, from the time I got hit till I got to the hospital was an hour or less, which it was very fortunate. I laid on the hospital floor for 9 hours before I got to the operating room. I gave up 2 chances to 2 pilots that were injured, worse. I say worse than I was, so I always say things could be worse. You can always find somebody that's worse off than you are. And I got in the operating room around 9:30, and Major from Boston operated on me, and he said, "You're going home." That was it. Hey, as I say, I was lucky. I'm here today, which is more than a lot of them can say.
I had another veteran with me on that trip, and that was his 10th time back to Italy. And he's still alive. He lives up in East Boston. He was so annoying. All right. No, I like him a lot. He's one of my best friends, but he's got this trash bag with him in Italy, and he won't let it go. He's got all sorts of black and white photos and paperwork and documents, and he's like dragging it around. And yeah, we put up this monument in '75, and he's a total opposite of Al, right? Al put the war behind him, moved on, but Rocco's all about the reunions, the associations, the divisions. And he's carrying around these documents, these black and white paper, and I got to lug it around everywhere, and I'm getting frustrated with him, like, Rocco, nobody's gonna know what you're talking about. These people have moved on from the war. Like, come on, stop. But little did I know, you proved me wrong. Maybe while that loads. Rocco served with the 85th Infantry Division during World War II, and he served in Italy. And he was, like many other 30% of the World War II veterans, 30% of the serving American forces of that time were Italian Americans serving in the U.S. military. And he got sent to Italy, like so many other Italian Americans there. second generation Italians going back to Italy to fight a war when their parents left Italy to immigrate to the United States. So there was a lot of sad irony during the Second World War. A lot of Americans getting killed in Italy after their parents had just immigrated to the United States.
Al and Rocco at this rate were now both in wheelchairs. They couldn't walk after had been on their feet all day, but pushing them through the halls of this church and this abbey that took so much of our U.S. troops and Allied forces to take, I couldn't help but to think how it symbolized the sacrifices and the exhaustion that it did to take the whole area. I know both those World War II veterans found peace inside of that monastery, because when Rocco removed himself from his wheelchair and walked up the stairs of the altar unassisted, holding on to the side of it, I know he was just making his peace with God, and he was very happy to be there. Proceeding down that windy road again, Rocco started pestering me about visiting this village called Reconciling. He had been carrying around these old photos, these old notes and documents the whole trip, and really wanted to visit the Polar Bear Monument of the 85th Division and try to find some ammo box he left back there in 1944. So we reached Reconciling, which wasn't well known to our tour guides. You could barely squeeze vehicles through the roads and the buildings, but we found some locals kind of sitting on the corner smoking some cigarettes, and asked them if they had known where the 85th Division Monument was.
Well, we're at Reconciling. There's supposed to be a monument that we put up here in 1992. And it was a hard thing to take. This place was heavily fortified, and we have 2 boxes here. But I don't know where we're going to find them now. So there's a restaurant at the top of the hill. This must be the restaurant at the top of the hill.
Let's go find out.
Signor.
proprio all'ingresso della nostra.
What year? What year did you take this photo? 1992.
Ah, in 1992. Questo è che facevo
So they are recognized. They are recognized in some people here. C'è another restaurant.
ma forse si riferiva a cosa?
Conosce il guidi?
A Focelleiro.
Conosce il guidi?
Me lo sono ricordato io.
Conosce il guidi? Oh, io stavo parlando a questi.
So it's incredible. After 75 years, Rocco is showing some of his photographs, and people here is recognizing other people on the photographs. That's just crazy, amazing.
Until the interpreter told us they were recognizing people in the photos who still live in the town today, including an old lady who was just around the corner. We start following these locals. We're pushing Rocco in the wheelchair at this rate. We go down this tiny little alley where they bang on this woman's door. Her 2 daughters come out, and then the other woman, who's 97 years old, comes to the door, and then Rocco and the women are starting to reminisce. They're starting to speak in Italian to each other, and most importantly, they're recognizing themselves in the photos that he took from the 40s and when he returned in the 70s.
1992.
Che sapore Lucia! Mamma mia! Questa è storica!
Io stavo parlando con i cristiani, conosce questi?
Sì!
E questo...
This old lady was here during the war. She's 96 years old, and they are talking about the war, the fighting, and that's incredible. That's just incredible.
Showed them the pictures, right? All of a sudden, they all could turn around. They all recognized practically 10 or 12 people, you know. So oh, wait a minute, she was here in 92. She's 97 years old. I says, is she married? No, brought her out here. I made her laugh like that.
This speech started to become just as powerful as returning Al to see the grave of his squad leader. Here I was, looking at the faces and the expression and the voices of these locals and what it meant to have Rocco there. They were saying how historic this was and what a brilliant reunion it was to be there, since their village was destroyed in World War II. There were still bullet holes in the sides of the walls. I haven't cried doing this project once. With all the 90 or so World War II veterans I've interviewed, and I had to walk away because the tears were running down my face, seeing the human reaction and the human emotion between what this man from East Boston, Massachusetts meant to this little village in Italy. It killed me. It killed me. I'll never look at Rocco the same way again. So.
Yeah, you know, I've had unbelievable, I had no idea where this rifle would take me, where this book would take me, and it's been unforgettable. And the fact that these guys are still around for me to be of age to talk to them and understand and even bring them back to their battlefields. I have hundreds of more hours of me bringing guys back to where the Battle of the Bulge was, to where Normandy was. It's been just an unbelievable experience I'll never forget, and I'm so glad I did it. I just got back from Normandy in September, and I'll show you one more clip. And I took a P-47 pilot, which was a fighter pilot and a bomber back then, and they were used to go out and find and destroy German tanks. He was 99 years old. He had never been back to where his airfield was, and he lost one of his roommates. One of his roommates that was another fellow pilot. His name was Ted Smith. He was killed on January 1st, 1945, which was one of the last major offensives for the Luftwaffe before they were completely and utterly destroyed. And Ted Smith was shot down by low-level flak and died. He said, "Tell my wife I love her," and hit the ground on the radio, according to Ed. Ed's 99, he had never been back to where his airfield was. I got to take him back to where his airfield was. It was all overgrown. I took him back to several places, other crash sites of where his friends were. And the local Germans who were farmers had pieces of these guys' planes because they've been digging up the soil over so many years. So we left with pieces of plane. So we went to a cemetery in Holland, and again, I found where Ted Smith's grave was. And I don't tell Ed why we're there. I tell him we're just visiting other Massachusetts guys. I want to see if he recognizes Ted Smith's grave. And so here's a little clip of that. Man's 99 years old. I mean, he put the war behind him. He was the head coach for golf at Duke University. And he, 77 years before, he's looking at the name of his dead friend again, So it's been just a great experience. I get to educate so many young kids that follow me now on Instagram from videos like this. Everyone from 15 to 18 who are now being more educated about World War II from my social media, from my book, than in some schools around the United States of America. But yeah, I'm running out of steam on what I can, what else to talk about. But has anyone read the book already? Anyone looked at it? Anyone? Oh, you guys read it?
Listen to it.
We both listened to it
Yeah.
together.
Oh, okay.
Well, separately, but at the same time.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people tell me they listen to it on audio.
Yeah.
I drive a lot for work, so it's still
Yeah.
on in the car.
I'm gonna work on a volume 2 because, like I said, of the 215 names on the rifle, I've only got to tell 19 of the best stories. I wanted to represent the whole war on the actual rifle itself. And by doing that, I wanted to talk about, you know, the bombing campaigns, what it was like to be a tail gunner in a B-17, what was it like to be a medic, what was it like to be fighting in Burma with Merrill's Marauders, what was it like to be a Japanese American fighting in World War II in Italy, one of the most highly decorated infantry regiments of all time, what was it like to be a black American fighting in World War II as a tanker, what was it like to fight in Italy, what was it like to fight in the Battle of the Bulge. I wanted to really just try to represent anyone from a buck private to a Medal of Honor recipient, everyone's kind of point of view. And according to my critics, I did just right. And what was most important to me was the World War II veterans' perspective and opinion, what they thought about their own stories. I've had so many everyone from Vietnam to Korea to other World War II veterans tell me I did it right, including guys from my own generation. And that's all the most I could ask for in life, is making those guys proud. And then come the other readers, you know. So. Greg, is there anything else you want me to touch on in particular?
Well, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
I'm fascinated because I have black and white pictures of my father.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you've talked about this, I am interested in what kind of gun he's holding. I have no idea. He was in Germany. He has pictures of children, kids that now that I have tons of pictures of my dad.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, I have no idea nothing. All I know was in Germany.
Right.
But what I've learned tonight is I'm going to take those black and white pictures and look at them tonight. But will I know what military? I would know nothing else.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Where was
I don't know. I mean, maybe I can meet you sometime and show you.
Where was he from, your dad?
Oh, Revere.
Yep. So, if he enlisted from Massachusetts.
Right.
Revere, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
You start with, the veterans agent would have his discharge paperwork.
Uh-huh.
Then you can see, what division he was in on the paperwork. And then that puts you where that location might be in Germany, saying, the 30th Infantry Division was in Frankfurt or
It
something.
had to be like, well, because I was
And those kids could be
right, I was
very
born in
much still alive.
47. Right, I was born in 47, so he must have been over there like 45.
Well,
So
he was
that
there
is-
probably smack dab in the middle of the war.
That's right, he was.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here. Now I'm gonna look into it.
Was your mom German?
No, I'm
just
Jewish,
teasing.
so not German. But my father, my last name is Klein, which is a German name,
Yeah.
but not, American German. But is there any way that I could ever meet you? How long are you gonna be in Winthrop?
I live here.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going just
Yeah.
visiting.
No, I'm a police officer at the police station.
You're a police officer?
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh,
so-
I live next door to Mary, the lieutenant.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you can come to the police station with those
You're
copies of
kidding
those
me.
papers
We can
anytime.
put you in too.
And I have an uncle that, I just have someone, I'm a person that saves pictures. And I will be, would you mind doing that if I just brought them up, a couple of them and this?
Of course, and then you should see Rose Mazzucchelli
You know?
at
Yeah, the veterans.
Town Hall. You say, this is my dad's name and this is his date of birth. Can I have his discharge paperwork? Get that, she'll print it out for you right in the
You're
office.
kidding. Oh my
Nope.
gosh, okay.
And then we can try to put the puzzle piece together of where he
I have
was.
pictures of a tank, on a tank. I'm just like, thank you.
Yeah,
Didn't think of anything of it. But, I'm a woman and,
I'd love to look into it.
oh, thank you
It's
very
my
much.
hobby, it's my
So glad,
passion.
thank you very much.
Aren't you glad you came?
Quick question, is there an online database for those cemeteries in Europe?
Yes, there is. It's called the American Battle Monuments Commission.com or .org or whatever. If you Google that or if you search that, you'll find it.
Okay.
Then from there, they'll ask you basic information. Obviously, name is the most important. If you definitely know who it is and what branch, gives the ability to check off the branch of service, what war, because I don't know how many foreign cemeteries we have total worldwide, but we have World War I cemeteries, guys still,
Really?
we have buried in France and in England and Belgium. We have World War II cemeteries everywhere from the Philippines to Sicily to Hawaii, to Punch Bowl.
So in theory, could we track down Winthrop residents who are buried in those cemeteries?
Yes, and somebody, I don't know who it was, I was told, I never got to meet him. Oh boy, I forget his name. He was a Vietnam veteran who passed away of cancer, and I can't think of his name at the moment. He did a significant amount of research on each Winthrop resident killed in World War II. So if you go to Winthrop Memorials, you just Google Winthrop Memorials, this guy already did this. I think it's part of our town website.
Oh, I think, actually, I think that's Mary Lou's husband.
Yeah.
What was his name?
He's not dead, is he?
Where?
Osborne.
There was a guy who did a significant amount of research to help the bio of each man killed from Winthrop.
Okay, but I think the site is currently run by Mary Lou's
Okay,
husband.
probably winthropmemorials.org, and you'll get to scroll down, choose the names. So I personally visited Winthrop residents buried over there. Joe Madonna, who was from Locust Street, was killed in the Battle of Bulge at the Silver Stars with the 101st Airborne 506. Company I think. Company I, but yeah. He was killed, the house in Belgium where he was shot in the head is still standing there where he walked out of the doorway, the kid from Winthrop. Yeah, so we visited his grave in Luxembourg National Cemetery, Joe Madonna. He was class of 1939 in Winthrop, I think. I visited Ralph Cunningham, who was from Payne Street. He was killed in Normandy, he jumped in with the 82nd Airborne. He was captured and then executed by the Germans. And then I just visited a kid from Court Road's grave, who was also in Normandy. And I can't think of his last name at the moment. We have a resident buried in Florence, buried in Rome, buried in Hawaii. But there's 2 Winthrop kids 100% buried in Normandy. 1 in Luxembourg, maybe 2 in Luxembourg. And I can't remember everyone. So. In 1948, the parents were given choices to leave your child over there, buried where they are, or they would be, I guess, exhumed and brought back over here in the United States, which a lot of families did that too, because they wanted their kid to come home. My uncle was buried in Italy for a little bit, then they dug him up and brought him back here in 1947. So.
That's what Morris used to do all the time.
And one separate question, I'm just curious what your view of, in the case of the research you've done in terms of World War II, and after that generation goes, do you think it's going to be more difficult to connect with veterans of the Korean War and the Vietnam War because those were a lot more difficult?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's already, it's very complicated. World War, and I say this in my book, World War II is the most popular, favored war of all time, and it's a war that killed an estimated between, this number's disputed all the time, between 60, 70, and even 80 million. The figures have been out there of how many people have died from the war. That's civilians, soldiers, whatever. We'll never get the real numbers out of Russia for sure of who was killed and what was, but let's say there was 65 million killed. It's crazy to think about a war that killed that many people has made so many people rich, because since then, now there's video games, there's movies, there's books, there's TV, there's action figures, there's G.I. Joe, that you name it. Everything is built from that good versus evil war, World War II, where it didn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican or anybody, everybody hated the Nazis and hated the Japanese, and that's what was going to happen. We were going to win no matter what, no matter how many villages and cities we bombed, no matter how many civilians got killed, no matter how many foreign kids got killed. It was going to win, 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 win. Every headline in every newspaper, we were great, they were bad. And that's really not the case anymore at all for all the future wars that went on. Now things are political, now things are red tape, now things, if one civilian's killed, it's the front page of our newspapers, the front page of our headlines. We don't carpet bomb cities and towns. We don't fight wars anymore where we take land and we own it. So we take land and we own it, it's a front line. Now we just kind of plop in, try to do policing, and it's very tricky, and it's not, even though there's groups in this world that are just as awful and bad as the Nazis, you know, i.e. ISIS, i.e. Al-Qaeda, you know, who want the whole world to be a certain way, as did the Nazis. It's just not gonna be that way. But what about meeting these men who we refer to as the greatest generation, right? They did some not so great things to win the war, and they know that. And so when I'm meeting them and I'm talking to them, every one of them taught me a lesson. Like, I don't care how many movies you watch about bravery and about this. He's like, I didn't see, these World War II veterans said, I didn't see any of that. I saw a lot of scared kids. I saw a lot of executions. I saw people who didn't have to get killed. I saw war crimes. I saw this. They really taught me that war wasn't, back then, was not just black and white, as it is today. They're sitting here trying to tell me the real story of war on their couch at home. You know, forget about Saving Private Ryan. Forget about this for a minute. Forget about that. This is what happened. This is what I saw. Some guys didn't even want to talk about it. Some guys didn't even want to relive it. They didn't care that they were World War II veterans. They don't even have a veteran license plate attached to their car because of what they did, of what they had to do. And they taught me so much that, you know, like I mentioned in that video, a lot of today's veterans, we live in the shadows of these guys, right? These guys are gods. They're the reasons why we joined, but they kind of try to reverse that with me and say, that's not the case. Listen to this, you know, war is a crutch, this is horrible, it was this, it was that. And it made me look at them a lot differently, as in not bad, but just as, I don't have to live with, oh, I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, that was such an unpopular war, and this happened, and that happened, and maybe we shouldn't have been there. Because they taught me that you could say that same stuff about the Second World War, and they really brought it to me. And I talk about it in my book. I don't talk about everything is good versus evil in that book, you know. And every one of those veterans who I brought back to Belgium in particular, in 2019, I had a kid reach out to me and said, my dad is the Tiger tank commander for the German army. And I saw on, you know, Facebook that you're bringing 19 veterans back to Belgium. Can we have lunch with you? My grandfather wants to make peace with the American soldiers. So, of course I say, yeah, absolutely. But I said, whoa, pump the brakes. It's not my choice. These guys are gonna have to vote on this, right? You know what I mean? Like these guys were captured, tortured, beaten, shot, had their friends killed by the Germans. I don't know if they want to go meet them and have lunch with them right now. So
Their story.
right. So at the airport, I got them all in a private room, and I got them all in a private room, and I said, listen, guys. I told them what I just told you guys. I said I had a young kid reach out to me. His grandfather's a German veteran, and he wants to make peace. Does anyone have any objections? And every one of them unanimously voted to meet with the German King Tiger tank commander. And I have a clip of it actually, so I'll show you. And so I said to them, you know, how do you guys want to do this? We're at lunch, he's gonna walk in at any moment. I don't want it to be awkward, awkward silence. And they all ended up clapping for him. You know, because you're walking into a room full of 19 American World War II veterans. They're the victors, and their family members. And the American veterans clapped for him when he came in. And that was a huge message that, like, you know, we're taught all the time in world history that the Germans were awful, the Germans were bad, they did this, and obviously that's all correct, but when they clapped for that German Tiger tank commander, I didn't get captivated by them clapping for him. It was the people behind the German Tiger tank commander, his son and his grandson, of their dad getting treated almost like a hero for the first time ever. And the look on their faces when these American veterans were clapping for that German, where it just, I don't think I have any photos. It was just unmatched to anything I've seen. They were just turned so bright and so happy that their grandfather was getting treated with respect, rather than just you're a demon for what you did or what you were made to do or whatever. And as far as the American soldiers view it, this guy was just doing what he was told. Before this trip began, I had been contacted by some local German historians who wanted to reunite a German tank commander with American veterans. I had cleared this with all the veterans. As much as I wanted to surprise them, I had to make sure all of them felt comfortable meeting an actual German soldier. Jurgen, the German tank commander, he's walking down the hallway now. His tank was destroyed in Bastogne by six rounds that hit his Tiger tank. So we're gonna just clap for him to have the courage to come and face you guys after all this time, as you guys the victors. So
Get this camera.
Want to clap 6 times?
there you go. This is Jurgen right here. So. And this was, Wayne was with the 6th Armored Division that fought against your unit in World War II, 6th Armored.
I'd rather have you as a friend.
So, Jurgen, the Tiger tank commander, was a very brave man. Not just him as a soldier, but to be able to walk into this room full of Americans during the anniversary of a battle they lost, and to shake the hand of a soldier I brought from the 6th Armored Division who was responsible for destroying his tank during the battle was, I don't think words can describe the anticipation that was coming. The two of them, Wayne and Jurgen, hit it off really well, talking with a translator and shaking hands and making peace. I think a lot of the veterans who saw that, who may have not fought against Jurgen's actual specific division, also started to make their way to shake his hand while he was seated between all the veterans for lunch. As Jurgen and Wayne were meeting for the first time, shaking hands, I tried to listen in to what Wayne was saying, and he said something along the lines of, "I'm glad we could meet like this and be friends than the way it used to be." After lunch, we got to see the 90th Division Monument with Hank Baggs, who had never returned before. We went on to the 101st Airborne Museum.
It's great to be here with fellow warriors, Army and Marines that we've all fought together in World War II and these current wars, and to share this with each other, I think is, for me, it's extremely impactful. I love it that, in your 90s, the war is still there, but we stay connected, and you're doing that, and everybody on this trip is a big part of that. And I think that's an important thing. So anybody that has not connected with a World War II vet to understand the very unique experience of them, you just have to do it. I think it's important, don't you?
I was very happy to meet that German tank commander at dinner time today, and we meet as friends rather than as enemies. It's so much better.
Yeah, so I got to experience that too, meeting the enemy. And that goes back to, what you're saying about how it's going to be viewed as, we already are not treating, we can go back to Belgium and the people come out of their storefronts, their homes, their businesses, and they're like 4, 5, 6 people deep on a sidewalk. And it reminded me of all the New England Patriots parades or the Red Sox World Series parades we had. That was like bringing the Beatles to this. And because they're taught at a very young age, these are the men who liberated you, these are the people who saved you and got rid of the Germans, and people are holding up their grandkids over the crowd of people so they can get a live look at a real World War II veteran. And that's something, we're definitely not going to have, and we don't have it in South Vietnam, we're not going to probably have it in Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever. But I remember I was actually in Germany back in September, and all the chaperones I bring on the trips are Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. So we're the ones pushing the wheelchairs, we're the ones putting the guys to bed, we're the ones having a beer with them, we're the ones pushing them around, helping them up and down the bus. And we were in Germany. The World War II veterans were all tucked away in bed, and we were having, there was like 8 of us, all Iraq vets, and having a beer in a courtyard. And this kid came up to us, and he was an Arab kid. And he goes, I heard you guys are all Iraq veterans. And we were like, yeah, we are. He's like, I'm a Kurd. Do you mind if I have a photo with all of you guys? And I said, sure, absolutely. So we all got in this photo with this kid who was appreciative of our service, who was from Iraq, and that was like the first time that had ever happened to me, and I got a little bit of a taste of what these World War II veterans must feel like coming back to Belgium and Normandy and stuff like that. So that was the first time that ever happened.
Did you ever meet, Ron Kovic?
I never met him. I know who he is. The
Okay.
Vietnam vet, paralyzed.
Fabulous movie, I mean, it's a great story.
Oh yeah, born on the 4th of July.
Right.
Yeah. No, I never got to meet him yet. So we'll see.
Okay.
I just have to say, I really appreciate listening to it. My grandfather was in Italy, and he never talked about it. We have pictures, but just like most vets, they just wouldn't talk about it. And so my uncle has started to put some stuff together. He served in Vietnam as well, and they were both Seabees in the Navy. And so, so I want to go back to my hometown and try to get their discharge papers, and same for my stepfather's father, because he served in Italy as well, and we used to see the dog bites on his arm from the German attack dogs that got him, and he lost his hearing for a while from a shell exploding near him, and so, and again, he wouldn't ever talk about it, but when we were at the beach, we always saw those marks on his arms, and so just to hear other stories of men that were able to open up and kind of let that guard down was great, because I didn't have that opportunity because they're both passed now.
Yeah, and if they're passed away, the veterans agent shouldn't have an issue, releasing the documents to you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Andy, I was at Monte Cassino. I traveled to Europe towards the Champions Italy. And when we went to Monte Cassino, the fellow that was giving us he mentioned about the Polish troops knocked out the nest.
Yep.
And they closed that cemetery down for 30 years. Nobody could go back there. They figured let the people that could come back, let them all die, and then maybe other people wouldn't really come back there.
Yeah, so...
and he also said that was a diversion for the other invasion, the Normandy invasion.
Yeah, so...
Is that true? I mean, that's what he said.
Monte Cassino is it's a mountain in Italy that had an abbey on top of it, or a gigantic church full of, that was used by monks. And we had a horrible, bloody, awful time trying to secure this area of Monte Cassino, the Battle of Monte Cassino. And we sent bombers over to destroy the abbey, the church, and the Germans just used it as now fortified positions. When we couldn't breach that area, we pulled out of there, and then we diverted, went around and invaded Anzio instead. That's how we left it. Yeah. And we left that pile of rocks, that mountain up, while we started advancing up Italy, we left the Polish troops to be responsible for taking Monte Cassino, and they ultimately did. And at the top of the mountain is a beautiful, beautiful Polish cemetery of Polish troops who finally secured Monte Cassino by, before the end of the war. But we left it for them to take as we bypassed it, because the whole point was to sack Rome and keep pushing them, hold 30 German divisions in Italy so they didn't reinforce Normandy, reinforce the Russian front.
You mentioned General Marklack.
Yeah.
So, do you know Marklack? I think I know all of them.
Yeah, he was not the most popular general of World War II. He was in charge of the 5th Army in Italy, and he got in deep, deep trouble with the Rapido River crossing, where 2 battalions of actually might be even regiments of men were killed from the 36th Infantry Division trying to cross this river. And he was forcing them to cross this river, and thousands of men got killed when if if he had known about the Anzio plan, he shouldn't have been doing that. But he wanted to rush to Rome, to walk into Rome and say, I captured the first Nazi capital. And so the 36th Infantry Division family members and survivors took him to congressional court after the war, but Congress cleared him of any wrongdoing for that. So the families of the survivors of the Rapido River crossing were not happy because thousands of guys got killed trying to go across this river in daylight at nighttime, and it was just seemed like he was in such a rush to capture Rome. And he did. He captured Rome on June 4th, but then on June 6th we invaded Normandy, and it didn't get any headlines at any press because everybody was all obsessed with the invasion of France, Normandy, the beach there. That, you know, it got totally washed out. The capture of Rome on June 4th, 1944, because June 6th, 1944 was D-Day in France.
Well, we're gonna be closing the library at 8, so thank you very much for coming. It was a terrific.